liberated them from their primitive ways. It's kind of cool.
It's super cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be a little weird if there weren't like drama going along with it, though.
Yeah, there's these people. Everybody somehow wants access to these people, which is also weird, right? Like how they are being put on a pedestal, which is what their whole politics is sort of against, right? And then like it felt a little bit like you're waiting for the Beatles or something coming out of a plane somehow, which is like a little bit silly. There are like these 7 that have been sent. They're also just like really normal people somehow, I guess. But no, like the event was still cool. I mean, yeah, there were some maybe discomforts here and there, but it was also some like they presented this historical event, and it felt a little bit like that. It was cool. It was very nice, very fun. Yeah, and I finally got to meet Mariana, which was cool, and Caponegra and Everardo and all those people that I've been talking to for months. So yeah, cool. It was exciting.
Very cool.
I hope Eric joins tonight.
Me too.
He didn't. He didn't confirm when I just wrote him, but we'll see if he shows up or not. I mean, he didn't even receive my message. I see. There's only one of those signs and not 2. So, yeah. Well, yeah. He's like in the invisible committee. Yeah, he's like like he co-wrote the Coming Insurrection and everything. This guy.
Yeah.
From Glenn Beck fame.
Interesting character. Yeah, Glenn Beck fame, exactly. I mean, like all that shit is mostly written by Julien Coupa, but he's somehow involved with all that. Who's Susanna? Is that a new person? Or is that Eric?
Hi, no.
Susanna's my friend who I invited via email.
Ah, yeah, sure.
I tend not to use video. It's not my prerogative.
That's cool. Well, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome.
I will see Mikey later. I will share drinks with him.
Yes.
Good.
Nice.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I don't know you all, but I will.
And Susanna, you may have met Dennis at Omar's barbecue that time in that park.
It's possible.
It's
the only one I don't see the image for, but
right.
I can turn on my video, but my video always goes off after a while when I move.
It's fine.
Hello.
No worries.
This is me.
Hi.
Yeah, but how did everyone like Part Deux?
What?
How did everyone like the second part of this book?
It's daring, no, isn't it? It's I mean, like trying to map a transition to post-capitalism. That's like, even though it's sort of flaky or whatever, or I don't really know exactly where it goes. It's kind of like a
right,
like to map that transition without relying on Marxist philosophy of history. Like with that like sort of straightforward scheme, like that's kind of cool, I think. But we should probably flesh out what exactly it is. I don't know. How did everyone else like it?
I was gonna say, like, maybe we should start, like, the last 10 theses are kind of like where he fleshes out his like what is to be done question, you know, where he's talking about sort of more concrete ways forward. But maybe we should talk about like the 40 theses before that first, because if we get wrapped up in that, I feel like that'll just be the whole sort of discussion.
In that case, may I suggest we start with biopower versus onto power, because I thought that was
that
was a good place. Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that reminded me of was Deleuze's Control Society, but you know, the idea of its preemption, you know, kind of being able to kind of go into the conditions to do this nudging. He mentioned Thaler's and Cass-Sunstein's nudging. So it's similar to what we talked about last time, where it's, you know, you kind of give this kind of baseline freedom, and then just kind of mold was it a mold or a model? I mean, he's always going back and forth between those terms, or not. You know, he lays them out, but I get lost in his definitions sometimes. Just nudge people to making the choices that will just help channel their activity as much as possible into something that can be quantifiable and therefore capitalized upon. Yeah, so this onto power, I never came across this term before.
I think that he maps that onto this this Deleuze postscript shit, right? Like Foucault's discipline concept, and then Deleuze postscript on the what's it called, society of control.
Yeah,
like that's the two, I guess, biopower or onto power. I mean, Deleuze doesn't use the term onto power as far as I know, but he maps it onto that.
Yeah, I mean, there was one nice way you put it to create to define the distinction, was that biopower was the power over being, but onto power was the power over becoming.
Yeah.
Which ties to a lot of the first half of the theses, where, you know, I mean, being locks something down. It's something that can be categorized, defined, quantified, and then, you know, in essence, commodified. Whereas becoming is this kind of state that, you know, it's happening anyways, and that's creating that imminent outside, you know, all this activity and interest and intensities that, you know, is ripe for the capture. And that onto power kind of goes right to that level of that possibility. It's again that the language of dipping into something and pulling out that he uses a lot.
Yeah.
I like the way it's kind of intuitively described, but not systematically defined, like how the different layers actually, if you think about a Venn diagram, biopower and onto power is like a staircase of intrusiveness, not a more intrusiveness, but more like more control in a wider level. It makes me think about development, like sprint, and like having everything controlled, like project management. So it's like you have like an intermediate level with liberalism and biopower, but then once that is like settled, then you can raise to the higher level. So I like that staircase definition that goes into more softness as you go up, but also gives more control and more I don't know.
That's funny, because I saw it more like going down, and that each new iteration has like less potential in it, or like a smaller scale of potential, and therefore less imagination. So things will eventually just get more and more easily controllable and dull and shittier.
I'm not so sure about that.
Like that was the degenerate event. That's, you know, what we talk about, the degenerate event, where you have this main event and then this qualitative event, and you have a quantifiable version of it, and then that's going to feed into the factors that create the next qualitative event, although it's going to be more limited now, and you're just kind of going down the staircase towards this
well, the metaphor of up and down, it really depends on how you're looking, whether you're looking at whether you go more in like sort of microscopic level, or whether you're looking at it from the point of view of how much agency that power system has. So the more infinitesimal you go in control, the more control you have. So up and down, it depends.
Right.
It's an interesting metaphor, though, because when we're talking like high level, low level, the individual level, it's very important to handle those metaphors right, I think.
Yeah, well, and like high level is, you know, big concepts, and low levels when you talk about getting granular.
Yeah, but when you go granular, the more granular, the higher, wider power you have, despite the fact that because you can go infinitesimally to the deepest level, it means you have more control. It's interesting, that tension, though.
I don't know if maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think also with like getting increased control, so much of it has to do with both like degenerating or building up, but like categorizing. I mean, the more that corporations are able to categorize and define and like name things, the more power they have. I don't know if you think that fits in with what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, well,
I guess I mean, like,
it's the idea that the individual is something that's, you know, kind of a product of this terrible capitalist system that you want to get by, and you have to move on to this you know, personas, or it was personas, or trans subjects, or right.
Yeah, but it was also
the subjectivity without a subject. That's what
I think at the end there's also that point in which it describes more specifically about how especially the liberalist soft power looks at quantifying qualitative vision. So it described like everything is a bell curve. I found that very interesting, because it's like, despite we know that it is a bell curve, we still get the average, or like the highest point in that curve, but it's a dynamic process because it's all the time being softly analyzed to derive into harder rules or something.
Sure. Yeah. I guess too, I was thinking of, we kind of briefly mentioned last time, and like how things get commodified that aren't even products. Like we talked about how marketing is something that's, right, they're not even producing anything. And how like every time we're on the internet, our data is being tracked and stuff. And I was thinking about like the categorization in that the moment that they start getting that data, can categorize it and define it as different things, then they can market it, and then it gets a value. You know what I mean? Like by putting it in a box and saying that this data means this and this means that, that they're kind of creating value in, I don't know if that.
Yeah, and when they do that, you know, they kind of cut off a part, or a part gets left off. And
there was a piece of news this week that it's actually interesting in that regard. That, you know, if you heard it, like Apple having this, announcing that they have this system for which they grab all the data from all the iPhones and iPads and stuff, but they claim that their ad system is better than the competitors because they do aggregation without IPs. So, you know, if you're an advertiser and you buy from Apple, you are not really buying identities. You're only buying aggregated results from multiple people. So they claim that that is like better in terms of like privacy, but when we are having this debate, it's still bad. So that's how I was, this piece of news came out this week, so I thought it was relevant when I was reading that.
I did see it too. And
yeah,
I think it's better for Apple because then they can run, I don't know if you guys have seen the commercial where like the person is walking and like all the people are following them, and then
interesting. Yeah, right.
Like, so it's better for Apple because that's something they can promote and get people to buy their product over their competitor, because to people they're saying, hey, we're not, you know, you have a choice to turn off your data, but is it that much better?
It seems like the education of people in terms of privacy, it's also preventing them from seeing into the extra value of aggregation.
Right.
And still claiming that, like it gives them also, like people that have an iPhone, it gives them an extra excuse. It's like, oh, I have the brand that cares the most about me.
Right.
Yeah,
on an individual level, they can
capture on many levels. It's not only capture of your data, but, you know, capture of your brand appreciating heart.
Yeah, and in a more abstract level, the relationship between the PR of Apple, its image as a, you know, we are nice.
Yeah. Right.
But like in terms of modes of resistance, when we have that, when there's that surplus, he talks about it could either be recaptured, or he uses a really cool word that I like, rewilded. You know,
there's one. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say one thesis that really jumped out to me. It was on that subject of rewilding. It was thesis 59. I'll just read it. It's a pretty big claim. He says the antagonism between the rewilding of potential and its preemptive capture as human capital is the driving antagonism of capitalism under neoliberalism, replacing the contradiction between worker and capitalist, and pivoting on the creditor-debtor relation as arena of struggle.
That's
I don't want to make the same point over and over again, because I think I said something similar last time, but I'll put it in slightly different terms. I have problems with this metaphor of capture, or this image of capture, apparatus of capture, which obviously comes from Deleuze. I think what he's talking about, capture versus rewilding of potential, only works in situations of what Marx would call formal subsumption of labor, and not real subsumption, which is what most of our society is today. I'll explain what those mean. So formal subsumption for Marx was when a capitalist takes over a process that's already ongoing, say like a craftsman, any type of process of production where the worker basically still is in charge of what's being done, for the most part in control, and then the capitalist just extracts surplus value from that, as opposed to real subsumption, which for Marx is like basically like the factory system, where the whole production process is blasted apart and put back together under the imperatives of capital at each step, where the worker is just one cog in a machine, doesn't have real control. Yeah, it's basically just like the image of capture and rewilding. Like, what would be rewilded if you stripped that whole, if you blasted that whole machine apart? So what I'm saying is that I think this image of capture only works for certain sectors of the economy. Am I frozen?
No, I think
Can you guys hear me?
No, you're fine.
Okay. It only works for certain sectors of the economy. Again, I think Massumi's concentrating on this kind of like precariat creative class, which still, like, it's not the majority of the economy. It's a small slice of the global economy, and he's making that out to be the new driving contradiction of capital. But I think it's like a super narrow. It only works for a super narrow slice of the economy, and our world is constituted much more intimately in a totalitarian way by capital. There's nothing like, sorry, I'll stop there.
No, but I mean, we had the discussion last time, right, about like what capture is, and that capture is not only whatever, that's also productive. It also produces what it captures somehow, paradoxically. And like if you look at Marx, the first chapter of Capital, I think if it's the first chapter, he says like, hey, if you look around capitalism, what you see is things. It's like an abundance of things. It produces so many things. And then Guattari has this thing like, no, it produces more than things. It produces subjects. And that is, I think, where the capture rewilding sort of antagonism he looks at here, right? And that's also why this debtor stuff comes in, I guess. Like Lazzarato in his book, he explains that, like, you know, like, we are produced as indebted subjects, and that ties us to capitalism, and that those are also processes of capture in this Deleuzian sense. It's not just a pre-existing process that is sort of like intruded upon by capital or something like that. It's also I don't know if I'm being very clear. I'm sorry, I'm also eating.
No, yeah, I mean, it's true that Deleuze and Guattari in that chapter say that, yeah, they say it's not just capturing something, it's also like, you know, infiltrating and reformatting what it's capturing. But I mean, you can say that, but it's like, I'm trying to make this concrete in my mind, this difference, or this antagonism that Massumi says is the driving antagonism of our age between capture and rewilding. And I'm just trying to think about that in the context of like what he could possibly mean about, like, you know, the general structure of our economy and of our everyday life. What could that possibly mean for like the way that we organize everything?
Yeah, if I try and think about that concretely, I'll think about it more like the nexus between culture and economy. So like a new kind of culture emerges, and how soon that elements of that culture become sucked into, you know, become economized and commodified, and then eventually robbed of its original cultural energy and becomes pure style.
And that's it works for that. But what I'm saying is like that Massumi's saying it's the driving contradiction of our age, but like that's it's just like, yeah, the culture industry works that way, but like most of the economy doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Hello.
Hey.
All right.
Hey.
Can you flesh that out? Are you referring to what most of the economy is? That like industrial economy, or what kind of economy are you talking about?
I guess I'm talking about like the totality of global capitalism, and like the I don't know, like what there's this I don't want to get too deep into the Marx stuff, but like,
but you do
what
want to.
How should I put this? Yeah, I don't know. Can I think about that for a second? Someone else can hop in.
All right, let me think something to say.
Oh, hi, Mariana.
I mean, how does that fit into production and transportation, shipping? I mean, just as two examples, but those are like massive percentages of jobs and of the economy.
Well,
like
in the Marxian sense, without production, you can't really have commercial capitalism and in a sense finance, although that's becoming a trickier and trickier thing to say. But I suppose with Massumi, you would I guess we would approach it through finance capitalism first, because that's where he puts the emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
So can you think about a specific kind of job that would be very, very, like, I'm thinking, for example, the service industry, but in terms of some of those jobs have been spun out of capitalism itself. So I'm thinking, for example, like customer service. I don't think Marx ever thought about customer service. So sometimes maybe some of the jobs that we are trying to assimilate into this model are like tentacles of something that should not exist in the size that we are measuring it. You know what I'm trying to think? I'm trying to think customer service in particular, because nowadays it seems to be like an extra tentacle of any kind of corporation, even if you build products, right? So there would be some kind of, you'll have to, an information service. So that's, for example, a kind of job that it has been derived from the complexity between the interaction of people. And I'm thinking about rewilding, like that kind of job doesn't fit very well. Like, how do you?
No, well, a post-capitalist future cannot have customer service. That would be terrible.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking of that, but in a way, that's also a discovery of capitalism. That there, even if you, I sometimes think about that. Like, even if nowadays you have a very, very, very good product that was in the hands of, you'd still have questions. So there would still be some role, for example. And I think that's one of these positions, like this kind of roles that I'm not sure Marxism really covers. And nowadays is an explosion.
Right.
Honestly.
So maybe that's an example. We've got to rethink the idea of a big corporation makes a product, you buy it, you have a problem, you call customer service, but like how things are made and for whom, and in what distances will they travel, what kind of connection can people have to the makers in different ways, you know, which is, you know, wildly huge structural imagination at this point. But
like just to give an example, the hospitality industry, I guess it's one of the other biggest ones ever that was not so spread out at the time.
Yeah.
If you look at many of these things, they're always related to care, which is interesting on its own.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see some of that structural change, like also to like cars, or for example, I was in the car with my sister. She's picking up her kid from daycare, and you're in these small suburban streets, and it's just dead end traffic because it's all these single people, all these people in one person, one car picking up one kid from a daycare, you know. And again, not to think of like here's a thing you have to do and a place you have to get it to, but you know, rearranging space in such a way that everyone things were on a smaller scale, and there was more of them, that everyone had what they need, you know, much closer to not need cars, for example.
That's kind of what I was getting at before with like our material environment is already so structured by the compulsions of value. And what I mean by that, I think it is, maybe we should just have a discussion about what capitalism is. And I would give a quick, simple definition. It's just generalized market dependence. That means both individuals and enterprises are dependent on selling their goods, which in the case of an individual is their labor, on a market. And they have to register, the way that they connect to society is that they register their productive capabilities through the market and money mechanism. So money is the feedback mechanism by which they, register themselves as performing useful labor in society. They don't perform it directly. It's all mediated through that market mechanism. So the way that the like what you're just saying, Mike, like the structure of suburbia, I mean, like, yeah, it's way worse here in the US. The material environment itself has been kind of just like built out under this imperatives of value production, not of human use. And so like I agree, we need some rewilding, but I think also like it's not like if you strip off the price mechanism and the market mechanism and market dependence and just like the kind of deep structure of all that there'd be anything like left. It wouldn't just require rewilding, it would require planning and rebuilding under new and under the terms of use value and planning, and you use a lot of different criteria other than just profitability.
Right. So, and it's not like you could just raise or bomb whole city blocks.
Right. So yeah, I guess that's what I mean by the economy, Dennis. The generalized market dependence that for the past few hundred years has developed our world into the shape that it is now, and it's a blind process. It's blind, and it's driven by these abstract compulsions towards profit rather than human use. Yeah, and that goes not just for industrial production, but for service jobs and everything. So, in order to rewild, you would need to break the generalized market dependence of both individuals and enterprises, separated enterprises. You would need to break down that separation, and then you would need to build back up through some sort of communal planning mechanisms.
5-year plans.
Right, but I'm not talking about at the national level. I mean, I don't want this to get into a discussion of what planning is, but like planning. Like Jasper Bernes in a recent essay, he said Machu Picchu was planning. Like there's types of human planning that we can see signs of that are not coordinated by the market mechanism, but also not like a Stalinist 5-year plan. There's a lot in between those two things.
Right. Well, from there we could talk about his bit about the autonomous zones, and the way that they will have to. Which is funny because we recently saw the autonomous zone. What was it in Seattle? Something like that.
Oh, the Chaz.
The Chaz. But one of the things that stood out about that part was when he says these autonomous zones will still have to engage with capitalism. You can't completely disengage. It's pompous and it's impossible anyways. And if you don't, they will crush you. But the way to do that was with the was a creative duplicity. And which is something would have been nice to have some examples of that. But that sounds like he's hinting at one of the strategies that can be played in autonomous zones or in communes or co-ops or stuff. But what at what point is he just saying be a criminal?
For me, that bit was actually probably for biographical reasons also like the most interesting, right? Like there's this quotation. Maybe I can read it. Mm-hmm. Only a project that operates in its own processual arena according to radically anarcho-communist as opposed to anarcho-capitalist principles has a chance of beginning to move beyond capitalist economization and its attendant power formations in a way that is maximally resistant to recapture. Intentional communities and autonomous enclaves are a traditional route for experimentation of this kind. Their limitation is that they are obliged for their survival either to opt out of the economy in a way that is rarely sustainable or find ways to link back in through participation in the local economy or the creation of micro businesses. They also tend to devalue processual excess, which expresses itself most intensely in surplus value of flow in favor of a regained rootedness in a regulatory ideal of real life. Yeah, that sucks. That's super annoying. Their effective intensities often pull around figures of purest return to nature, authenticity, real community, and true activity, craft. And those are all normative notions. Experimentation with alter economic models employing digital currencies can potentially pioneer more sustainable and flexible ecological models, proudly impure and without return. Intentional communities and autonomous enclaves are a welcome element in an alter economic ecology as long as they are able to reconcile their dedication to local structure with open system, but they do not provide a general model for alter economy. And like obviously this speaks to me, right? Because the Foundry, is this sort of autonomous enclave or whatever that does engage with capitalism, or like most of the shit I eat I buy in a supermarket. But like these kind of people that show up that want, I love nature, authenticity, blah blah. That also bothers me because you want to sort of it shouldn't be a retreat. It shouldn't be a retreat, and how to make it not a retreat. That's a question that I've been thinking about for like a couple of years already, and I think he articulates it here as well. Although there's no clear answer, right? Like, okay, what's the answer? Employing digital currencies, yeah. Whatever, but like how to make it not a retreat. I would love to ask him that, to be honest. How to make these things like cohere in such a way that they give rise to something bigger, and it just become an enclave or something.
Right, I mean, like under the current process, the answer I think of would be like produce something and create a surplus, but that would seems to be counterproductive in terms of the bigger question.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. Like here in Galicia, they have made the digital currency to connect like mutual aid projects and shit like that. Nobody's using it, of course. But how to yeah, what to do? The Lenin question.
Anyone know what's going on with El Salvador's experiment in Bitcoin?
Oh God, no, I haven't read about that. Do you?
No, I have no idea. I just know that they did it like last week or 2 weeks ago, but I haven't heard anything.
I mean, they
since.
accepted it as a currency, but of course, El Salvador, they had their own currency pegged to the dollar, so they already didn't have their own fucking currency. So like now they have two currencies that are not their own currency. one being manipulated by the US and one being just an algorithm.
Well, then they will be looking closely at what Elon Musk does, because he just he shifted the value of Bitcoin just by having a couple of tweets every day. You know.
Yeah.
That could affect an entire country now.
Similarly to the Agua, right? Of Ronaldo.
I like that one.
That was pretty epic.
The what?
You heard about Cristiano Ronaldo, right? So you heard he was after a match, he was gonna give some like whatever interview, and there, as usual, there is, apart from the brands in the back, there is a couple of Coke bottles in front of him. He took them out of the frame, so he was aware of frame. That's important. Let's not forget that he's aware of frame. Takes it out, takes a bottle of water, and just says water. I think it was 30% of the base price of Coca-Cola stock went down that day. Just that. It was amazing.
I mean, it's probably recovered most. I hope not, but
probably. What if it's a Coke stand? What if it's a stand by Coca-Cola?
But that's a surplus effect, if any.
I was thinking a lot about that. I wonder if it's like Cristiano Ronaldo has a couple of adopted kids at home, I believe. One or two. So I wonder like his responsibility as an individual, like feeling in those situations like he is advertising for something that then he gets home and like he tells his kid, no. And especially him being like a health icon as well.
Right. I mean, it does kind of blow open the difference of the fundamental value of a stock price from its technical value, or
and the power.
Right. I mean, nothing happened to Coke's warehouses or fixed capital or operations that day. It's just a kind of a media event that spilled over into other domains, finance, and that's incredibly common nowadays. And
mini survey: would you say that Cristiano Ronaldo and a PR firm organized this, or it was spontaneous?
I don't know. Maybe it was personal revenge. Didn't
personal?
Yeah. Maybe he hated Coke. Didn't he used to advertise for them? Wasn't in the past, anyways.
Personally, that part is complicated, especially when looking like at the contracts these people have. In terms of it's not like they choose it, is they probably have like a list of things to meet, like things to do because of whatever.
So I was just going to say we could move on to the meat, I think, of the book, the last 10 theses, the crypto stuff, unless anyone else has anything else to say about what comes before that.
I mean, I wish someone could give me an answer how to make autonomous enclaves revolutionary rather than withdrawing. but no.
Yeah, just more and more people have to go to them. You just need to create a network effect.
Yeah, well, yeah, they have to interlink, right? That's what this other website we're making is all about, stream space shit. But exchange stuff and that mutual aid networks. That's what I've been thinking. But it feels like when you read Massumi that for him would be a bit too like conservative, real economy based or something, right?
Yeah, back to the land stuff.
Yeah. Anyway.
And maybe it'd have to be more of a partnership with things like Foundry, also with interurban, co-ops and stuff. To have a urban
Well,
rural.
I think it's then good to segue into the last 10 theses, because that's the part where he's trying to provide like a kind of answer, right?
Yeah.
I did not completely understand like the whole thing of that. I'm especially confused about one part that he talks about how to make the qualitative amorphous calculation of token generation and planning, which I'm very confused about. So if anyone has a clear idea of that, I would love that.
There was also a bit an annoying part in there, right? It was like he just like half the fucking wide world has his little crypto projects going on. And then in his roadmap, obviously, this is like a significant part of the answer. My little crypto project is like something highly specific. But anyway.
Yeah, it felt like the crux of the problem, actually, and all being black boxed into that a little bit. Has anyone actually taken the chance to look at the actual project that he was mentioning? The actual crypto project that he was mentioning?
I haven't looked at it.
So there was HoloCoin, which is a different one, but then he was talking specifically about this Gravity and Solid, whatever.
Yeah, it's really
Space,
too bad
I
that
think.
Eric didn't show up, because he's like super involved with the Economic Space Agency, and he probably like made part of this shit. Like, so it's really sad he didn't show up, but I haven't looked at it. Did you?
I tried to take a look, but I couldn't. I didn't have that much. I only started reading like 1 week ago, already a bit late. So I haven't had really a lot of time to. But I was very curious about, like, it feels like like the meat of the a bit of the. It sounds like a very nice solution, but it felt like precisely the crux was nebulous.
Well, like you say, it sounds like a nice solution. Why? What does it solve?
So from what I understood from it is, you're generated like your own microcosmos of value that your group basically defines, and it's tied to your own kind of performative goals, let's say, internal to your own thing. And they were saying how you can design your internal, let's say your internal Bitcoin would be mined according to the tokens being released by you having released certain milestones. So it's like the commitment to your project goes tied to your achievement. And that releases the tokens, but that only works internally. Basically, you are not tied to the human hour, or it's like you define your own tokens and how they are released and who will make the task. And that will generate the actual tokens generated by that project. And then he says, there's another layer of cryptocurrency that ties to your local one, and that second one is actually the one that may be traded. So then you satisfy the lemma requirement of still interfacing with capitalism, because if not, you have no chance of survival. But I didn't understood exactly how the design of the inner core kind of crypto, and then also given that extra layer of crypto which will be traded as any other one, which will be a specific, how that one achieves value for it to return back. Because if you generate tokens but nobody's interested, then you still got your results though. So that's a good thing. So that part, I think that part was interesting, but I don't know if if it makes any sense what I'm saying, okay? But I think that's how I understood it.
But doesn't that also sound like incredibly, to use the dirty word, neoliberal? Like everyone's just really like doubling down on the entrepreneur of the self, and
it still puts the responsibility in the shoulders of the person to define that conversion between like market value, which you don't want, into a value that makes sense to you, that is not capitalist, and it's the responsibility on your shoulders to define what that is. That part, that's why I was a bit confused.
You're right to be confused, because it would still, all the same dynamics of capitalism would be happening in this situation. It's basically, he's talking about petty bourgeois commodity production ultimately. And you're right. How would so your labor has to register in the general social level of productivity in order for it to be valuable, in order for anyone to want to buy your crypto. And he talks about like anarcho-communism and like how we need to make sure that like and all those little strategies he has. One of them says something about like not tying labor to no correlation would be built in or be allowed to develop between input of time and production of value. Well, it would have to if you need to maintain the general social level of productivity. Marx called socially necessary labor time, or else the things that you're producing won't be wanted by anyone else, and your crypto won't be worth anything. So like that,
yep.
The value of your production needs to synchronize and be commensurated with what other people need in the anonymous marketplace, and that requires generally average levels of productivity. And it's Marx's whole concept of value.
No, I see your point, but at the same time, I see why his proposal has some merit on breaking that barrier, because theoretically, as if you have like an internal cryptocurrency of your own within your project and you have assigned value to it, and let's say that you've been within the cooperative that you're doing this work, you've reached like some level of general agreement of balance between hours of your life working and task, and let's say that is not a problem. Let's say it's just structural. Is by having this extra layer of currency in which you have control over the intermediate value, and it's also tied to your commitment to actually delivering within the microcosmos of that currency. If you don't jump to the capitalist, you can move into let's say an exchange that is tied to a value that you have defined and you have control over, etc., which before you didn't have. Do you know what I mean? It's just like adding a layer of control. It's like adding bumpers and giving you kind of agency back, because your value is not traded. What is traded is the exchange of that with another cryptocurrency, and then they play there. But within your small cryptocurrency, you should have control because, etc. That crypto is tied to your progress. I think that's the only way I see it. But... No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, I mean, it depends on what. So Massumi's very vague about what is being produced. He uses the term project, and the only example he gives is a film production collaboration. But if we're talking about producing some sort of end product that's then going to be exchanged with the outside, unfortunately, that will fold back on the internal dynamics of how it's being produced. Because if someone else produces in half the time for half the cost, the same thing that you're producing, your thing is not going to sell for at what you want it to sell at. People are going to buy the other person's
you're
commodity.
Totally right. Sure. Then there's the example of the Mittelstand in Germany, like the small companies that still produce. They have tension, but then they still have a certain level of control. How do they do that?
Yeah, and like the Mondragon cooperative in Spain, like they still have to keep up with the socially general, levels of productivity, whatever they're making. They have a more egalitarian income distribution within the firm, but the firm itself still has to basically self-exploit itself. People still have to produce with the same kind of methods that a capitalist corporation would. There's just more egalitarianism within the firm, but like it's that compulsion to keep up with the socially general level of productivity that is what gives your output is how its value is commensurated through the medium of money, or in this case crypto. But these cryptos would only gain their value if people wanted the crypto, so then they could buy the products that you're producing. But if you're not producing efficiently enough, no one's going to want the crypto to buy the products. So
it seems to me like an unsolved problem. I totally agree with you. I completely agree with you. I think that the problem is Massumi is putting his finger on trying to solve a problem, but not looking at the others. Because he totally believes that adding that layer is following with his thesis, working within the creative duplicity of the same environment, but trying to gain some value back and recapture it kind of by doing this. He still doesn't solve how to actually do it, or only very vaguely. But I think there's some value, that's what he's trying to show, that there's some layer that's interesting there. But I agree with you. Yes.
As a little digression, I feel like in all this talk, it's always like talking about projects, like interesting, productive, creative projects, and it kind of ignores some of the more odious, necessary work of keeping society, going, say trash collection or stock in the shelves, or whatever. And like in a different kind of, in a post-capitalist society without classes, if that kind of work was decided, like it was kind of shared work, the same way that you might share these tasks within a household, then there would have to be sort of a time-based amount of value put onto that kind of work in order to make sure that like everyone has kind of done their fair share of the amount of keeping it all going. So instead of looking at value for these interesting projects and get off the ground, maybe value should be looked at where the essential work, as is the new term for low paid labor.
Totally.
Yeah, the rebranded.
Agree.
Yeah, it's a bit couchy. So you think it's impractical? I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, creative duplicity and if other things like that can be turned into concrete examples. It's not a matter of being practical to win the day, but as some small steps.
Yeah, he's also, when I think someone said something about the experimentation aspect, and I don't know what that actually means. I was also interested in what degree of tolerance with experimentation there is. What's experimentation mean, and how to make experimentation safely? That still I don't know.
Doesn't need to be safe, right?
No.
Does it?
Play with matches.
He talks about getting dirty all the time and about like not trying to stay.
He does mention you have to play dirty, and get down and dirty.
But he also said we can't use violence in the revolution at the end. So.
Yeah, not for ethical reasons though, just because it doesn't work. And I can kind of agree with that. Well, do you think we should be violent?
I mean, if you're already getting violence done to you,
how do you define violence?
Well, I guess well, no, I guess it's not how, it's who gets to define violence, and what does that
yeah, sure,
and what does that serve?
I mean, Graeber wrote very smart things about this, right? Also.
Yeah, but like definition, like categorization, it's it's not how you're categorizing it. It's how's the categorization process being managed, and by whom, for what? Blah,
yeah.
blah.
Yeah, we got to read that Benjamin piece. You're right.
What's so the Benjamin, is that for this group or another group? The Benjamin.
It's all mixed.
It's all mixed. Okay.
There's something else in the Massumi that I wanted to talk about that I was very confused by, and it's kind of related to what we were just talking about, but his concept of the effectometer, and what Susanna was saying about how, like, the translation from the qualitative into the quantitative, where he's talking about how, like, there's kind of this computer process going on that's algorithmic, that's basically extracting data. He calls it differentials of like sound and voice and text and stuff like that. That's like registering how popular things are, kind of that are being talked about on this online platform. And it's then it's through an algorithmic process, it's like building this effective mass that's then minted into crypto. Did anyone kind of get that, how that would work? Because he says that the crypto prices the underlying asset, which is this blob of algorithmically generated effect. That seemed maybe the most wacky part of the entire book to me.
That does sound a little sci-fi to me.
Yeah, it seems like at this point, I work in artificial intelligence, so for me, when I read these kinds of things, I'm always a little like, like what? Like, yeah, it sounds awesome, but what? Because it's like black boxing, something that you don't really want to talk about.
Yes.
Actually, to me, and it sounds very neoliberal, precisely because of what we were saying before. And it says at the end of the book, like, all measurements are Gaussian measurements, are like curves, right? You're always going to have a middle point and some distribution, and you actually don't even know how wide that distribution is, and that distribution is changing all the time. But at the core of this, it's at the end still a capitalist attempt to try to measure things. So it's neoliberal at core. Even if you're trying to do these things, like that's why I couldn't reconcile Massumi making this proposal with what are you really going, how do you structure that thing that you are like trying, what's the inputs and outputs here? Like you say the inputs, but like, that doesn't account for much what you're trying to say here. Yeah, I take all the voice differentials. What does that mean? I will get
like sentiment analysis, I would assume, which is pretty common already these days.
Well, that has proved to not really work very well.
Yeah, but they're still selling it to customer service software packages.
But so in artificial intelligence, I think there's something that people don't understand, and it's extremely neoliberal in its design. It responds to the average individual. Always. And that applies to all levels. It applies to the average individual in terms of their voice, in terms of their any kind of characteristics of their demographic, but it can also do stressful situations. I'm thinking, like, what takes you out of the middle point of any Gaussian? So, like, from that point of view, it's so narrow. It's
right,
nearly ridiculous when they say that this could actually solve things, because it's extremely narrow. And then if they try, he tries to say, let's make an amorphous blob, like you said, I don't really understand what he means, and I'm not even sure he does either.
I don't think he does.
Right, but
I think it's like one of the humanity saying, yeah, let's put AI there, and they don't even know what that is,
Well, it's branding.
And also, if it was going to work, like hypothetically, like if the thing that he's so vaguely sketching out did work, wouldn't that be like a terrifying form of heteronomy? Like if the computer algorithms are basically they would kind of be making the judgment for you. Human judgment and all of its multi-criteriality would fall out of the picture. The algorithmic process would be valuing, because he talks about how that there's that translation over the membrane between the qualitative inside and then which is the underlying asset that's then priced with the crypto. That would all be an algorithm. That pricing process would be an algorithmic process, and it would be so the process of valuation would be heteronymous. Not humans wouldn't be doing it themselves. They would be having something extracted from them, just like they do.
And it's surprising that someone like him will suddenly not stop for a second and say, wait, what am I saying? Like, algorithms cannot cover human behavior, and just step back and remove the paragraph. Like, I
wonder if you can make a very, very thin connection between algorithms based on this, the kind of the average, the Gaussian, top of the bell, with what he talks about with generic narratives, how individuality and neoliberalism is just basically taking these genetic narrative templates and just adding your own little modifications to them, basically as a way to have people a lot more easier to market to, and to, I don't want to say control, but to identify and to categorize, and then to market to, and then that's from earlier in the that's from like the 50s or 60s in the thesis. That sound
yeah, I don't like, yes, it's true that narratives move us around.
Right. I mean, it was just something from earlier I liked, where he starts attacking emotion, and he says emotion itself must be abolished, because emotion was like the way that personalization kind of it's the affect of personalization, which comes from generic narratives, and all that is part of that onto power of not necessarily, making us do certain things, but, creating the conditions whereby we will generally want to do the things that are most, that will be most capturable later. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I do go in circles and repeat myself from earlier times, but yeah, thought that was kind of cool.
To remove emotion, because it manipulates our behavior into a consumer stage, or
well, yeah, like emotion is like is what kind of is the building blocks of like personalization and individualization, and in the contrary way, that personalization is based on like this normativity that it'll just help us slide into certain categories of normativity, and then instead of emotion, which is always meant to be analyzed as very, very individual, which is basically would plot very, very nicely on the high point of a bell curve, the kind of way to approach your own subjectivity in this kind of potentially post-capitalist, post-value world would be to recognize that that what you feel are basically products of all these colliding intensities, and they're not your own, and they're part of this process of trans-individual becoming.
Sorry, there are seagulls outside the
Yeah,
window.
and I feel I'm ranting.
Sorry.
Too.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah,
I wish I could
okay,
show you.
Yeah, end of rant.
They're fighting. Anyway, sorry. No, so are emotions in a post-capitalist society still, are we going to be able to access them? Will they be there?
No, I think the point is to banish them. It's a post-emotion society.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm still debating myself with that.
Right.
Because when they also say like capitalism doesn't control everything, I think emotion is one of those things that sometimes could precisely break that barrier.
Well,
and
yeah,
excuse it. So
yeah, there is something that we generally call emotion, but I think he wants to create a distinction between that something, which is the activity happening in the eventual imminent outside, when it becomes called emotion with all of our constructs of emotion, which are very individualizing. That's when we've allowed it to be captured. But if we rewild it, something that's different than emotion, that is less clearly defined. Yeah, and I don't know how
that's individual also somehow, right? So, like something more trans individual or whatever. Mm-hmm. But this is this whole Deleuzian edge, I guess, like a personhood, individual personhood is somehow an effect of capitalism, etc. But affect is an impersonal thing, and it goes through us, and individuals sort of materialize through affect. But yeah.
Right, now I don't know how this connects back to the crypto angle.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't really.
Yeah, I saw those kind of as separate trains of thought, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I just derailed a little from that with that little fun side digression.
Well, no, but I mean, like, I think cognitive science has told us like the importance of narrative for a lot of things like memory, belief, etc., and it's not to be overlooked when you are looking at adapting into something post-capitalist, like controlling the narrative and who controls the narrative, as you were saying as well, reclaiming the narrative and how to do that within the boundaries, but itself breaking those boundaries is not simple.
Yeah, and especially how a lot of crypto coins, are running on nothing but, in a sense, narrative. There's no underlying assets to them, simply the shared expectations or hype or
and and saying that capitalism, like precisely in that part, there's a lot of emotion. Stock is just emotion.
Mm-hmm. Stock is emotion. I like that.
You like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm writing that one down.
But I just remember, like, the Reddit, like how's it called, the guys who were buying all the GameStop bros. If that's not emotion, I don't know what that is.
Right. Yeah. Well, they call it meme stocks, and memes are kind of the condensation of internet narratives.
What's the like that I found is like an interesting fluke, hyper capitalist fluke.
There's one quote I wanted to read from thesis 67, which was kind of memorable. He defines an emotion as a unit of personalizing narrative. And then he says, human capital's generic self-molding is composed of emotional pearls strung together in a self-actualizing necklace circling the person.
Yeah,
good image.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think that's where I was speaking from. It's nice. Yeah, he's got some really nice turns of phrases.
I personally didn't like that metaphor because it sounds Sausurian and a structuralist. And I think nowadays we are in a much, like the idea of pearls and necklace is super old. I studied linguistics, so I mean, and that is like the classic one, and it's used throughout also in like industrial design, and it's very old-minded though.
Right. Plus, it's also a little vulgar. I mean, I guess. What else?
Going back to the crypto thing,
yeah.
I don't know that much about how crypto works, but like what I'm interested in on a sort of more meta level is like, how are all these like humanities academics it's like I kind of see a similar thing happening with MMT. There are like humanities people getting into MMT, and I guess now there's humanities people getting into crypto. All these solutions are what I would call circulationist, in the sense that they are concerned with the circulations of currency rather than like thinking about the system of commodity production itself, and with all of its blind compulsions and pathology and dynamics and pathologies. And a lot of it, I think, could be like if we took Marx a little more seriously and sat down and read Marx, read Capital Volume 1, like you would see kind of the dead end to a lot of these circulationist solutions, whether it's MMT or petty commodity production structured around crypto. I think there's it's a lot to talk about, but like, I don't know. Are there any other circulationist solutions besides MMT and crypto floating around the humanities world that I don't know about? Did anyone?
No, I mean, it's a good concept, circulationist. For us, it makes sense when I think about it for MMT, but off the top of my head,
there's a movement that I've seen on Twitter. It's like people have called it MMT Heideggerianism, where it's like I think it's like based at this department in Florida or something, but it's like people sort of kind of reminded me a lot reading this book of like trying to fuse MMT into sort of a more philosophical vocabulary, and Massumi basically is doing that with crypto. But I never personally saw crypto as anything potentially progressive. I always thought about it kind of more like basically like glorified gold. But
right,
so
for me, what was more interesting was the blockchain technology, right? And like maybe to try and map that out onto this onto the Massumi, where like in the past you have like activity, and that's the qualitative dimension, and then it gets registered somewhere, and that's the quantitative measuring of it. So for example, it could be taxis going around all around the city, and then somewhere there's a ledger making notes of all the taxis going around in the city. Same thing with money being moved from account to account. The money gets moved and then somewhere it gets recorded. But with blockchain, those two things are fused into one process. The registering it in its new position is the event itself, right? So it's maybe talk about it as a weird blend of the qualitative or the quantitative. It's one where in quantification the qualitative doesn't get completely excised, or less of it slips out. This I haven't thought of before, so right now I'm just speaking off the top of my head. But in terms of the money movement, the advantage of blockchain is kind of clear, because there's a lot less opportunity for fraud, and not to mention all the other ways blockchain has of the fact that it's distributed and so many people can have the proofs of the key, et cetera, et cetera. But what's interesting is that the event and the registering of the event somewhere is one thing. Blockchain.
Yeah, well, but it has a fatal flaw. I mean,
right.
Bitcoin, it's traded like as if it was any other stock. Mm-hmm. It's subject to the same valuation through capitalism than anything else. And it's claim to merit of mining, self-controlling the value of the currency because it controls the amount of mint that is running around the system, is not worth anything if people are trading on their perceived value of the currency. So,
but look, I agree with a lot of things that people say here, and I agree with some things that Massumi says about crypto and everything, and that it still takes a notion of money that is perhaps not the one we should take as its basis, so it becomes sort of like capital libertarianism and blah 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 blah, and it's still transactional. Yes, I agree with all of that, but crypto was invented in a very specific historical moment, not to solve a 150-year-old question posed by Marx. Like, it wasn't invented for that. And like, I'm not a technotopian. I don't think it is going to solve those questions of commodity production and all that shit. No, crypto was invented about a few months after the central banks pumped an amount of money into the system, just created out of the blue, that could have solved hunger for 500 years, if I'm not mistaken. And showed how the state and capital are basically the same fucking thing at this point. That's what it was posed against. And that is an actual problem that came very clear during the financial crisis, and crypto was supposed to be a solution for that. It's also not going to solve that, probably. But there, I think, is its radicality. Its radicality is not in reforming industrial capitalism or solving problems posed 150 years ago. That's not what it does. And like that, people blow it up and think it's going to solve cancer and like whatever. Like that's just people being stupid.
I think that's a good point, for sure. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but also blockchain and Bitcoin or any of the, I mean, they're also like, they don't come out of nowhere. Like, they're also like gold, extremely extractive, right? I mean, it takes a ton of energy to run a blockchain, right? Like, it's extremely
right. And fewer and fewer like fewer other entities have enough to actually keep doing it. Like, it's being the energy money, I think, is being concentrated in fewer and fewer.
Okay.
Parties.
Isn't in the Massumi book he offers an example that there's like a cryptocurrency tied to the amount of I think solar power or something like that. Like the mining is driven by amount of energy generated by something. I think I recall, or maybe I read it somewhere else. But I think he even criticizes those models because so.
But like if a cryptocurrency is tied to some sort of endeavor like solar energy mining, but at the same time it's being traded, so its price is going to fluctuate based on its desirability. Again, that just it's just kicking. It's just like volleyball. It's just value volleyball, and in that weird oscillation can be channeled towards, a directed plan to, I don't know, create more, distribute better, etc.
Do you think there's any kind of like issues that can arise from the fact that it feels like you're kind of separating people into classes when if things like cryptocurrency became more apart, that because there's a whole lot of people in the world that are never going to be interested in it because they don't understand it, and they're never going to, and they're just like cut out of, you know what I mean? Like, and that we're kind of separating people into like a whole nother.
Well, will it happen that there's a lot of businesses nowadays that accept more and more Bitcoin, and then PayPal accepts Bitcoin, so you can like convert it and stuff. But at the end of the day, it would also depend on whether they allow it to become a real currency that fights in the same fighting grounds as the other currencies. Until that happens, there is a class element because there is a potential there, obviously. How many things can you buy on Bitcoin? I mean, you can trade it, but
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's still not usable.
In El Salvador, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, you can look. I don't think this is going to solve the problem. Don't get me wrong, but there are credit cards that run on crypto and stuff like that. You can do these kind of things. That does exist. I also think crypto moved in a new direction, right? Bitcoin was this anti-central bank thing. Central banking is a problem, even from any Marxist analysis. Like it is a fucking issue, and it's what kept capitalism going much longer than Marx would have expected. It's one of the things. So it was posed against that, against a very specific situation. Then blockchain evolved, and now the interesting aspect is not so much the currency aspect anymore, right? It's shit like whatever, smart contracts. That whereas
Logistics.
yeah, whereas in like traditional technological progress, it replaces people that are on the bottom of the food chain. It replaces cab drivers. Well, what smart contracts do is they replace a platform like Ether. Like Uber or a platform like Facebook, and this isn't really getting off the ground yet, and it might, and it's even if it does, it's not going to change the world and not solve all the problems that we're solving. But this is the limited sort of like scope of the political sort of implications of something like blockchain, in my opinion. But no, it's not going to bring revolution or lead to post-capitalism. I don't believe that.
What the smart contract? I was unfamiliar with that. I'm kind of a Luddite. Can you just explain what an example of what a smart contract would be?
Smart contract, a very basic one would be: I write a contract. If Dan paid me 200 Bitcoin, the house belongs to Dan. So then when you do that, it can all be automated, and that would replace a notary, for example. So like there's certain politically radical sides to that, because you could have like as I said, you could have a platform like Uber could perfectly run on smart contracts, and you could perfectly program it in such a way that it doesn't lead to a couple of CEOs making loads of money. It could perfectly be democratized. That is possible.
Another kind of smart contract is like if this product gets sold, like 50% of the proceeds go to this person, 40% to this person, and so that could already be caked into the purchase. So.
Yeah, you can do those kind of things. You can also rent out your processing power. You can do all kinds of things that weren't really possible before. In practice, it will probably be most disturbing to stuff like notaries, or stuff like lawyers that do mergers for companies. Because if you tokenize your company, the merger will be a lot more cheap and more easy, and a lot more like it will need a lot less paperwork. So I think that's those are the kind of industries it will disturb in the end. I don't think it will lead to like communist Uber. I have been in the blockchain space for like 11 years or something like that. It's how I basically paid for the foundry. So I know all this stuff fairly well, but I'm not this like whatever this white guy who believes Bitcoin will change the world. I'm not on that side of the blockchain spectrum.
Right. Well, I'm glad you asked him to explain it further. I mean, I understood all that from the beginning, but for other people,
But it sounds to me like, oh yeah, smart contract. Who makes those contracts? Because there's still like this kind of neoliberal thing of like I come also from Spain and I grew up there, shitty contracts. So what happens when you live in an environment in which every single contract that you can access around you is shitty? How do you control for that without kind of a central government or anyone to complain to?
Right, and that brings us back to the customer service question. No.
When there is no alternative, when everybody around you is trying to suck you dry, there's no way out. You can say, oh yeah, I'm not going to get any of these contracts. But again, there may be another person more desperate that will do so. So then smart contracts could have their like some hidden exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing about smart contracts, the negative side is, doesn't it create this incredibly complex Byzantine network of interconnected indebtedness that like, no one person can, have any sense of its magnitude, and one little thing that goes wrong could just lead to total breakdown.
There's the other extreme. What if you make a contract and you overpay because you are laundering money? How is that controlled? Like, you say, okay, I'm looking for someone to drive me from this to this place, and I'm going to pay $200,000. You know what I mean? And then you can launder all the money you want because there's a contract.
Yeah, that's what people do.
I guess so.
I mean,
NFTs,
Sure. Yeah, why not?
like Mariana says in the texts. Let's just abolish it all and call for communization.
Yeah,
Also, I do think there is a scary sort of like, and like maybe we shouldn't keep talking about crypto or whatever, or maybe we should try to get at what he wants with it. But one of the scary horizons of something like smart contracts, and like what blockchains do is they're like algorithmic production of trust, right? They cannot be hacked. It's like distributed and everything. So they replace notaries and stuff like that. But one scary horizon of what they do is the possibility to monetize everything. Monetize
exactly.
rent. Like I've been Ethereum, like the place where they made that was in my street in Berlin at some point, and I went to these meetings there, and there were people like saying, yeah, we have this co-working space, and so we made a smart contract so people get micro payment when they change the toilet rolls, like
Right.
the toilet paper. Like fuck that, I don't want to live in a world where like you need like to pay someone 10 cents to fucking wipe your ass. Like it's
Right.
that was just a very sad kind of universe to me. But that is one horizon, I think, of smart contracts. There's different ones
and like
maybe.
and like you were saying, Dennis, like it's not like it's a solution and it's going to bring about but it's something that could help in certain areas.
Yeah.
But like you
Yeah,
said
like every
too,
technology, right? Like every technology.
Yeah. It's not a silver bullet, but then like you said too, I mean, that sort of thing with trust, not only does it worry me, like you said, if it could get hacked, but yeah, I don't want to live in a world where we get rid of that social interaction of trust because I think then we're just fucking doomed. I mean, I don't want to live.
There's many sectors where that is gone, right? Like that's why you pay for a bank account, because you don't trust like there are sectors where trust is now left over to centralized instances that do it for a profit, but you pay them because you trust them to do the work.
Yeah, or through like the highly publicized social media, your virtual existence, that everything is being watched and everything you say is going to be picked over by everybody. All these terms and conditions you sign into in order to for all your interactions. You buy something from a store, now you have to be kind of subscribe, give them all your information. Trust is being sucked out of a lot of already. It's being sucked out of a lot of daily kind of interactions and transactions, being replaced by this centralized systems of data management. So how to stop it, I guess, is more the question than if smart contracts are truly going to be a way to just replace trust and with it things like intuition and how you feel about somebody upon meeting them, or somebody that a long time, and just with an intricate digital network of smart contracts where if you step in a line, you'll owe, and it'll go and you'll pay automatically to wherever the guilty party is, and the other way around. I mean, it sounds like good material for some good short stories.
Yeah.
Do you publish yours, by the way? Is it available now?
No.
No. Okay.
But I'll let you know as soon as it is. He says this week or next week.
Okay. Awesome. So how do you feel about the second part of the book? Were you guys satisfied with the value analysis overall?
I mean, I picked apart a few sections that individually I liked. I liked the way it guided the way suggesting we should think and conceptualize and try and behave. But I have no judgment on how he changed my understanding of value and reevaluating value too strong. I don't feel too strongly either way on that. And as for the end, I wasn't able to see how that's it didn't revolutionize my future thinking.
Anyone else? Do you guys have any last word, please?
Yeah. I think it was kind of fatally flawed at the end. I mean, it's kind of what I was saying before, just about like, I think it could benefit if it had a different understanding of what value is and how value mediates our social relationships. It wouldn't have put so much faith in this kind of, commodity production, exchanging goods privately produced within an enterprise, even if there's like multiple layers of different crypto mediating instead of just a national fiat currency. It's still like there's still going to need to be a general equivalent that you're exchanging against. That general equivalent is going to be measured against an average level of social productivity. And if you're not meeting that level, you're not going to be able to make your revenue is not going to exceed your costs, and you're going to have to drop out and then go like work for someone else or something, just like in capitalism. So I think he just didn't really understand that those basic dynamics of commodity production. And I think it's a bad road to go down, just trying to, have these, technical circulationist answers to what's a more simple problem. And I think the solution could be stated more simply too, although it's not saying it's an easy solution, but I think it could be conceptually stated a lot easier.
How would you state it?
I mean, I think breaking market dependence with
Or
basic
instead of revaluing value, abolish value.
Yes, exactly. And what that means is breaking market dependence on basic necessities. Not every, like, there could still be markets for many things in a post-capitalist society, but there have to be basic things, especially food, needs to be decommodified. We don't need new cryptos to like mediate our food production. We just need a basic level of your labor time, your input to society is not indexed to your consumption. Your consumption's guaranteed for basic necessities, like, especially food.
Housing.
Yes, food and housing and medical, treatment and things like that. The basic necessities for life, there needs to be like a planned, productive apparatus to handle those things. Then on the outside, all these other things could flower and multiply. You could have Massumi's little sort of utopia could be, out at the edges, but there needs to be this more, I'm not saying like at the level of the nation state, it could be at a much smaller scale, but there needs to be a coordinated productive apparatus to guarantee communal goods like food, shelter, and
in that sense, it's interesting that the example he flashes out is the production of a movie.
Right.
Like,
right. Projects over grunt work or essential.
Yeah. We should maybe I'd be interested in reading that Jasper Bernes essay on food and what that would look like, or not. But that was in the room at some point.
Let's do it. Do you have the link?
No.
Would you guys be okay with reading Jasper Bernes next?
Yeah, or what else? I don't know. I'm also okay
I'm okay with Jazzie Bernes.
That the link is on his website. If you just Google Jasper Bernes, I could send it out in the email, but I think the essay is called The Belly of the Revolution. That's the one about food production. He's got a couple others that are interesting about like logistics and stuff like that. But I like him because he's a thinker that kind of thinks about these logistical questions of like, if market dependence falls out, how do we quickly, scramble to prepare enough basic subsistence in a post-revolutionary situation, kind of thing.
Okay, so that'd be nice difference from this past two works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do that.
Great. That's a Marxist perspective, right? I guess. Like this endnotes dude, right?
Yeah, but you'll see it starts off with the critique of like mainstream Marxist theories of technology. I would say it's like he's a Marxist sort of in a general sense, but I think you would like this text, Dennis.
Okay. I'm curious.
He's very practical too, I think, which I think you'll appreciate.
Okay, cool.
And should we invite him since we get guest celebrities now?
Do you know him, or is he in contact?
He follows us, so on Twitter. Mm-hmm. For some reason, we're funny, maybe.
Probably for the videos.
I don't know. I don't know. Oh, OnlyFans, of course. No, but of course.
No, I meant the propaganda too.
Oh, that too. Maybe we can just like release a poster and see if he shows up, or maybe
I think
we can be.
that's also I think that is why John Holloway will show up. You know, you make this fucking YouTube video of him, and how is he going to say no?
It works.
Oh,
It's another form of capture.
It's a form of capture, yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I wanted to ask about that, but it's too late. I mean, how Massumi glosses over like culture industry and like his rejection of emotion. It seems over what the apparatus that benefits and like exploits human emotion, collective and individual, based on demographics. Like, why is that not addressed? Why is he like so willing to dismiss the Frankfurt School and the critique of the culture industry? I'm just curious, like maybe because it's not cool to like them, and I don't know, because I don't know what the scene looks like in academia currently. But did he mention?
No one likes the
I would
Frankfurt School.
just guess that for him the culture industry was wrapped up in what he was just calling neoliberalism.
Huh.
Also,
Interesting.
it's just one of its tentacles.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
There's also a tradition of like kind of contemporary French thought that I think Massumi's kind of wrapped up in. At a certain point, he says we don't need any more critique. He says critique is the wrong way to go. Reminded me, there's a famous essay by the French philosopher sociologist Bruno Latour. It's called "Has Critique Run Out of Steam?" I think it was published in the early 2000s, and he's very anti-dialectical, very against ideas of imminent critique. It's more about like not imminently critiquing something, but like breaking off and just productively creating something. Kind of comes out of the Deleuzian philosophy too, but like there is this kind of philosophical opposition to critique in the classical sense, I think, in Massumi.
That's very in the last. Well, Deleuze already said that, right? This is not the 20th century. 21st century is not the century of critique, but the 20th. I don't know which one he said.
Yeah.
There's a Rita Felsky book about that. There's the Latour text. It's like there's the last 10 years or something. It's been very prominent, and I did a roundtable on it a few years ago. I just posted it. Also.
Cool.
I saw him talk. He had some guest talks in the University of Edinburgh at the philosophy department, and he was talking for 2 days, 4 hours in total, about the Anthropocene. He's a very interesting speaker, but about the critique, I'm going back to Massumi. I don't think he says that critique is not necessary. I think what he's trying to say is that criticism should not be a goal of its own, except for defining new paths. So it cannot be. It cannot define, it cannot define the plan. It can only be used to observe new paths for the post-capitalist exploitation of. But it should not be, and that's the thing, like a goal of its own. And I think that was very interesting as well. Aren't we doing just that? Oh my God.
That's also like one element where I sympathize with his writing. That it's like critical theory didn't stop fascism. And Massumi's theory is more like introduce disturbance into the system. See where there's little points where you can move the system around, and that these are not based on like some subject position that judges something or that says the system sucks. No, that's not how that works. You introduce distortion into it and see where it goes off, see where it runs off to, see if it like bends a little corner. And I think that's quite admirable to think about it in those terms.
I think that's one thing I did like about it was an attempt to try and, not say you have all the answers, but try and think of it from a different. A while ago, I read Mackenzie Wark's book, Capital is Dead. And I don't know if any of you read it, but she's talking about like the vector class that she wanted to, come up with a new term for what not that it would like replace Marxist thinking, but just to try and get, like a different way of thinking of the age we're living in. And for her, the vector class was, having to do with like data, and that this class that is absorbing our data and using it, that they're like not exactly like the landlord and not exactly like the renter, not exactly like the owner or the worker, but that they're almost a different kind of class. But anyways, the point is that, what's that?
The influencer class.
Yeah, kind of. Right. And that both the influencers, but also those who are taking that data and turning it into value that they can sell to advertisers or different things that they're, but I really liked, and there are some parts of it that I disagreed with and some parts that I really liked, but I like that she's trying to, you know, think of it from a different point of view. And that's something I liked when
I'm just
reading
gonna
this.
add on the little debate here. Not all uses of aggregated data are bad. And unfortunately, I fear, because of what I worked, I fear every day that one day people will make the 0-1 binary decision of saying AI and data is bad. Data is not, like, there is a lot of value to be extracted from data that is not just advertising. For example, my company works on speech recognition, and you may think that this is like an extra, but certainly for a lot of people out there, speech recognition is a necessity. Without data, you cannot have good speech recognition. So going to just saying data, gathering data is good or bad, or what people do with this data, there's a lot of very legitimate uses of data.
No, for sure. I hope.
So I just keep reminding that in all debates of data, let's just use the advertising example, because it's a little bit sad.
No, I'm glad you brought that, you did say that, because I think it's a really important point to make all the time, is that, yeah, for sure.
There's far more things, I don't know, that nowadays help people do things. And I'm not trying to, you know, sell you anything, but it's true that then many of those systems, who controls those is still in capitalist hands. AI should be made more democratizable. That's the first thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like, I mean, one thing I think it's cool that Massumi is willing to, like, you know, look at new technologies and stuff, even if these aren't really useful ones for what his goals are. But, like, you know, for planning and inventory control systems and stuff like that, you would certainly need data and powerful computers and computing and protocols and platforms and stuff like that. So we shouldn't be Luddites about post-capitalism, for sure. It's a good point.
I wish he would flesh out a little bit more, but I don't think he can. I think he's sketching it out. That part between the qualitative versus quantitative in AI, like that, how the transition happens, the analog to the digital signal in opinion making and in behavior and stuff. It's super interesting. What anthropology has to say versus sociology, for example.
Yeah, I think that mechanism of translating one from the other is, you know, kind of central to his entire book, and is one of the points that, you know, need to be, you know, looked at and challenged and seized. Seize the means of translation.
Yeah, isn't that value at the end of the day, that precise transition?
Well, I can't stick around too much longer.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh, there are some drinks to be had.
There are drinks to be had. Yeah. That was fun.
Yeah.
We do again in a week or two. We read the Jasper Bernes in about 2 weeks or something.
Yeah, we said a week is too frequently. We're all quite busy people. Two-ish.
Yeah.